Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode.
Hi, Deep Chatters. I guess it's Tuesday when this comes out, so I'll say happy Tuesday. We have a special guest here today. Actually, we're doing something cool this time. We're doing a two-part series. Today we have Nikki DeBartolo, and next week we're going to have her, what do you call him? Is he your...
my ex-husband. I do call his wife my wife, but I call him my ex-husband.
Okay, so her ex-husband, and they have created something that is, it's just beyond inspiring, and I think something that everyone can learn from, whether you're co-parenting or not. They wrote a book together. It's called Our Happy Divorce. I have it right here, and they're coming on this week and next week to talk about how they've done this from their perspectives, right? From the wife, mom perspective, and then from the dad, husband perspective. So really super excited to dive in here today with you. And just so you guys know a little bit about Nikki, Nikki grew up as a member of the iconic San Francisco 49ers football family. I love the 49ers, so that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. And she was thrown into the limelight at a very young age, but her values that her family instilled in her have helped her to shape who she is today. And she continues to live by those core values, which I think you're all going to really see as we talk about what her and Ben have created here together for their family. She's the vice president of the DeBartolo Family Foundation, and she's made it her mission to give back to her community in every way possible, from supporting local grassroots movements to national charities, all while being an amazing mom, a supportive wife, supportive ex-wife, just kind of really just being an example of what's possible, I like to say. So thank you for coming and joining us. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I think that, parenting in and of itself can be difficult and present its challenges. And then when divorce gets kind of added in there, there's this whole other layer of challenges. So I guess just start by sharing your story with us a little bit, and we'll kind of dive in from there.
I think for me, I am the youngest of three girls, and I was really the only one that had any vision in my life to get married and be a princess and have that whole fairy tale. My other two sisters at that point, most of their lives, never even wanted to get married. Right. But that it was always it was my dream. It was every, little girl fantasy to, have this whole big fairy tale princess wedding. And I think that part of my judgment was a little clouded by the whole fairy tale picture. And I think another part of it was my parents, my parents have been married for 52 years. So that was one of those things that I was I'm striving to have what they have. So, I was 22, 21 when I met Ben. So I was young, and we had this, kind of rocky relationship. I think because we were, I'm a little bit younger than he is. I was very young. We started dating, and, it was a bit rocky, but we sort of said, you know what, let's just keep going. Let's see how this goes. We ended up moving to Florida together. And I think the next step for us both was we kind of looked at each other and we're like, now what? You're moving across the country for me, because I moved with my family. And I'm like, what is that? And he kind of said the same thing. I'm not moving across the country with you unless I know that there is a path for us. So we ended up getting engaged. We got married, had this big fancy wedding. And I always like to say, well, he usually says it too. He's like, I got sick on my wedding day. I had like knots in my stomach, had to go, and after the actual ceremony, had to go take my dress off and like decompress. I actually changed on my wedding day just to sort of like decompress.
Wow.
It was funny, like as I'm walking down the aisle, my dad looks at me and goes, "You don't have to do this." And I was like,
wow.
What? I was like, I'm like, Dad, do you see the church? Do you see all these people? And I was like, what do you mean I don't have to do it? So we kind of played it off like he was joking. And I was like, well, I just, in the back of my head, I just thought I had jitters. Yeah. And, but I did get sick. I ended up like, I don't know, I took something from like my stomach or something and, put a different dress on and went to the reception, everything was fine. But it was one of those things that we sort of, like, we always say that kind of like ran through every stop sign, every red light, every red flag, and just kept going.
Yeah. And
if we really look back on it now, we were like, you know what? We were like two best friends. So for me, like we were married for 7 years. We had Asher, we got divorced when he was about 3.5. And we sort of thought like, we ended up becoming like ships passing in the night.
Right.
And I don't think, but I wouldn't take back marrying him for anything because I wouldn't have my son. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so there was a reason, like I always tell people, I'm like, there was a reason. I'm like, that child was supposed to be here. And I'm like, so there was a reason that we did all this. There was a reason we met, we got married, we had this amazing child. And so fast forward to us getting divorced, we both knew that it was what needed to be done. But I'm the one that, like, my first reaction to everything is, what do I do to fix this? Mm-hmm. Like, how can I fix this? We shouldn't break up. Asher shouldn't have to grow up in a divorced family. I didn't grow up in a divorced family. Ben did grow up in a divorced family and his parents, it wasn't a very good divorce. It's fine now, but that's, 30 some odd years, 40 years later.
Right.
And so, for me, it was kind of like, fix it. And then you had to take, like, I took a little time and I was like, there's no fixing. Like, there's no fixing this. So then as you face those things as like, I feel like I was still young, but it was kind of like, oh shoot, what am I going to do? Like, here I am, I'm going to be by myself. I'm going to be divorced. I'm going to have this child. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm too young to be going through all this, but you know what? It was like therapy helped realize that, like, it's not that big of, it's not that big of a deal. Like, once it was almost like getting over like a bit of being ashamed at, this happening at such a young age and like trying to figure it out. But I was like, you know what? This is okay. So I knew, like, in the beginning, Ben was out for blood. Like, when we first started getting divorced, Ben was out for blood, where my side of it was, I don't want to do that. Like, what can we do? So Asher's life is as much like mine was growing up, and less of how Ben grew up. But Ben just kind of took off in like a whole totally different. Yeah, I think it was like I don't want to say all, like a male ego thing, and he'll say the same thing. So it's not like I'm not like pointing terrible fingers at him, but it was definitely he basically was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to like get you. So I was like, okay, well, I better hire a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I better figure this out. And, and my lawyer was like, you know what? Like, the first lawyer I spoke to that helped me find my lawyer was like a friend of our family's. And he was like, just give him some time. Like, let him do whatever it is he's doing and, let him figure it out. And he's like, I'll try to talk to him, whatever. So, Ben hired some horrible lawyer and ended up paying this guy so much money and, turned around one day and decided, hey, this isn't exactly the way, like this is kind of making me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
So I think it was one of the things it was easier for me not to come at him the way he wanted to come at me, because it would have just caused it would have been like an explosion.
So I have a question for you right there, because I think that's so amazing. How did you stay out of fear when he was coming at you? Like, what made you able to just sit and just say, I'm just going to give him some time?
I think honestly, I was so afraid of ruining my son's life that I was like, one of us has to stay sane. Like in this process, like one of us has to keep, and I don't think at the time he really understood that like what he was trying to do was what his parents did to him.
Right.
So I think it almost took him a little bit of time to realize, oh my gosh, like I'm doing exactly what my parents did. Like he always says some line about like that his parents would like feed the kids poison, hoping the other parent would die, and he's like that. He's like, I knew, like, he's like, all of a sudden I was becoming what I didn't want to be. So I think that, he ended up calling his lawyer and said, hey, like, how much money can I basically get back from my retainer? And the guy was like, a couple $100. Sorry, dude. Like, here's, and he called me and he said, hey, would you want to go have coffee? And I was like, sure. I mean, I was like, every emotion went through my body. Like, what do I do? Like, do I want to do this? Do I want to see him? Am I going to be okay seeing him? Like every single emotion. And I was just like, okay, sure. So we met at Starbucks. We sat at like the same table we would always sit at. And he, he looked at me and he said, I'm sorry. And I was like, whoa. And he told me he loved me. And he said, we have like, can we figure out this, without lawyers? And I said, I told him, I think he jokes that it was like the only time I've ever said I was sorry to him. And I apologized. And, I told him that I loved him too. And that, I expressed to him the one thing I didn't want was what we were doing, like what we were, like the path we were going on to ruin this kid. And he said, I have one question for you. I said, what? And he said, do you have any problem with joint custody of our son? And I said, absolutely not. And he said, once you answered me that question, I knew we could map this out from there. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I get it that there are people that don't deserve custody of their children for whatever reason, whatever, but like if it could be as simple as, something like that, where, he's a good dad. He's a great dad. He's great with his kids. And I mean, if I would have just said no, I mean, it would have been a whole totally different path.
Right.
I mean, as much as a mom, I mean, I didn't want my son going someplace else without me, or, having another woman, like helping put him to bed, or like, and we sat there and, we had another meeting at Starbucks and we sort of like mapped basically our whole divorce out. We did hire lawyers, but we basically mapped our whole divorce out, came to our lawyers and said, this is what we want to do. You guys figure it out from there. This is what we want to do. And, we want to, we're trying to be as amicable as we can be. And I think that it definitely took time, and we didn't get to where we are right now overnight.
Right.
I mean, it definitely took years to be where we are now. But I mean, in the beginning, we kind of just thought, let's figure this out so we can not make everybody in the room totally uncomfortable. Like, so we're at a birthday party, or we're, out to dinner or someplace, or at a party, that everybody's not going to be like staring at us going, oh, how do they feel? Or they feel weird, So we're like, you know what, let's just be able to be in a room together and not, and not be weird. And, I mean, how many years later? 13 years later, like we go on vacations together. We, Ben and I took Asher last summer to Africa together, just the two of us. And we were gone for 2 weeks. We did invite our spouses, but they were like, yeah, no. They're like, Nadia has they have 2 other children. So, you know, she was like, yeah, I can't leave my kids. And my husband couldn't leave because of his job. And they're like, yeah, but you two, go ahead. Like, have at it. Like, have fun. You know, this is something like, you know, it was one of those things that when Asher was young, his favorite books to read were animal encyclopedias. So we always promised him that we were going to take him to Africa. And Ben always said, if you dare take him without me, like that'll be like the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's it. So I was like, all right, fine, we're gonna have to go together then. But it was like, you know what? One of the best trips we have ever had, like 2 days in, you know, my son kind of like did the whole, oh my God, it's so far. 2 days in, he looks at me and said, this is the best trip I've ever been on. And I was like,
that's incredible.
I'm like, we did something good.
Yeah.
This is like the dream. Like, I'm in awe, like listening to this, because this is like, so my parents are divorced and they wouldn't be caught dead in a room together unless it was my wedding, which that happened. And, you know, a funeral, if that ever happens, and they're still around. But I feel like the thought of my parents coming together for me in the way that you and Ben have that's just like this fantasy that, you know, I've had in my head. And so and I think the main reason why is because there's still so much bitterness and resentment still that is lingering that they can't move past. And when I'm hearing you tell your story of like, no, I didn't initially want to share my son. I didn't want him to be getting put to bed by another woman. Like, how did you, my parents are like stuck there still. And it's been like 25 years since they got their divorce. So I'm wondering like, how did you begin to move in that direction of taking your son to Africa with your ex-husband?
You know, I think, you know, and people always ask us, they're like, I mean, did you guys luck out that you have 2 partners that also, I always hate to use the word buy into, but in a sense, it's buying into. Like I mean, you know, I think we were both lucky to have partners that kind of said, okay, if this is what you guys are both trying to do, like, you know, we want to be a part of it. But I think it's still, you know, it's still not easy when you have like to put like 4 different wheels together and then try to, you know, it's still hard, but they've been like beyond like our expectations were like shot with the 2 of them. But I think that both Ben and I too, with this, knew that if we brought someone into our lives that wasn't okay with this, we probably wouldn't have gone forward. Like with our partners, like it was kind of a deal breaker for us.
Right.
But I think for me, we never, like Ben and I always say, we never will tell you like any of the nitty gritty and the dirt that happened in the relationship. But it's just, we both went to therapy for sure. And I think that was one of the things that helped me the most. I mean, and I think that helped me, you know, coping so much with having another woman in his life, not Ben's, Asher's, like, you know, and I mean, for me, that was probably the most difficult part of it. Like, I really wanted, like, I mean, it like broke my heart. And like for nights where, you know, from when I wasn't dating and I was home by myself at night and Asher was at Ben's house, like, I mean, that's like, it's like a dagger to, like, when I'm like, you get into a little routine with your child and you like, you know, you lay in bed together, you read stories, and then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, well, he's nowhere to be, like, you know, that, I think the hardest part for me. And it wasn't even, and if that, I mean, it was easy for me when, you know, Ben started dating, that part was easy for me. But he'll tell you that I did tell him when he started dating, because I always, you know, I'm not throwing him under the bus, but, you know, he dated Mercedes and Diamond, and, you know, he went through the whole, you know, what men do when they get divorced.
Right.
And I just said to him one day, I called him and I said, hey, can you do me a favor? And he said, what? And I said, could you not introduce anybody to our son unless you know she truly means something to you. And his first reaction, I think, was going to be like, screw you. But he's like, I kind of, you know, he always says, I kind of took a deep breath and I was like, she's right. You know, like, I shouldn't do that. And so he said, absolutely. And I was like, okay, then I'm good. Like, you can date, do whatever you want, but just leave him out of it. And so I think that was like really kind of like a weight lifted off my back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there were definitely steps along the way that helped, but therapy was a really big one.
You know, it's interesting, like as you're speaking, I think what really shines through is that for both of you, whether you were in pain or whether you were angry at each other or feeling insecure, or, I mean, I can relate to that feeling. I'm divorced as well, and my son was 3 at the time. And I remember that pain of like not having him with me. And those moments, like I didn't have him to not have him, right? So I know that feeling. And both of you being able to, what it seems like through it all, keep your focus on your son's highest good or best, you know, that his, what would be best for him. And it sounds like, I don't know if you guys kind of said that out loud to each other, or if you both.
We always would say like, what's best for Asher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's so important.
I mean, we still argue, but we argue like brother and sister now. Like, I mean, I'll yell at him and I'll hang up the phone and he'll tell you that it took us like 4 years to write this short book because I would yell and I'd hang up and tell him I'm not doing a stupid book. And like, so, you know, I mean, we are definitely like brother and sister. And I think it's important that like Asher sometimes would go, well, if you guys get along so well, why aren't you still married? And I'm like, yeah, because it's like being married to my brother. I'm like, it just doesn't work that way. And, you know, like, I think it was 2 years ago, Ben had Asher on a fishing trip. And Asher, it was just the two of them and they were away. And Asher, you know, looked at Ben and said, you know, this divorce is really hard on me, Dad. And Ben goes, like, my first thought was, you little jerk. Like, do you know what your mom and I have accomplished? And you are telling me that's hard. But he goes, but then I thought about it and I was like, wow, like as easy as we have made this on him, it's still hard. Like, so I think that's a lot of times, you know, people still forget that, like how hard it is on a kid. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's it's difficult even from like a young age where it's back and forth with your books and your clothes and the bib. And I mean, he just was like, you know, it's really hard. And Ben's like, God, I mean, like and I think that was one of the things that Ben was like, you know, we have to talk to people about this because our kid hasn't made with us. He's like, and there's so many kids that are struggling. Even he's like, our kid's struggling and he still hasn't made. Yeah. I mean, I just think people forget how hard it is on the kids.
I think it's reflective of the environment that you've created for him and how like Asher centered this whole journey has been, that he feels comfortable enough to say that it's been hard.
Yeah.
Like that's something that's really beautiful. I think that a lot of kids just hold inside because they see their parents struggling and then they see, you know, it being about the parents and the emotional roller coaster that the parents are going through. And that then, you know, eventually they'll have to go to therapy for in the future because they never can actually express how difficult that experience was for them. And I think, like, how old is Asher now? He's like 16.
Yeah, 16.
Yeah, like what a beautiful reflection of that safe space that's been created by the two of you, that he can actually say like, this has been hard.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's, yeah. I mean, I think that we both tried to like have our own little bonds with him just to try to make him, you know, comfortable along the way to talk to us about stuff, because sometimes it's, you know, maybe, you know, like it's hard, it's easier sometimes to talk to one parent about something than it is the other. And I always joke that Ben's like talking to like when it comes to like things, growing up things, Asher would always come to me and I'm like, oh gosh, like, this is like, how am I supposed to answer these questions? Yeah, but I think it's good. I think it's important to have a bond. And I told you a story before we started that, Asher was 3.5, 4 years old. No, he's probably 4. And he was at Ben's house and I called like I did every night to say goodnight to him and tell him I loved him. So he's talking to me and he's telling me about his day. And he said, hey mom, do you know Nadia? Which was Ben's then girlfriend. And I said, no, I don't know Nadia. I haven't had a chance to meet her yet. And he said, well, you should know Nadia. Here, talk to her. And I was like, okay, well, all right. Okay, well, I guess that was his way of saying, hey mom, I have this girl. She's in my life. She's with my dad and me, and you don't know her. Like, why don't you know this girl, but I know her? Right. So, that to me was like, I hung up the phone that night and I was like, wow, like, this is a kid that was like, it's time you guys, like, you two have to know each other and it's time we need to move on. And I was like, at 4 years old, you were pretty smart.
Yeah. And this is how we started talking about this earlier, how aware. And I love that he was so, like Leah said, felt so safe and is so verbal, to just be an example to anyone who's listening about how aware our children are, even at the youngest of ages. And when you kind of have a child in a stroller and you're talking to your girlfriend about their dad, or you're talking to your brother about their mom, they're absorbing all of it. The way it feels, the way it makes them feel, the words, like it's going in.
Yeah. There were times like when Ben first moved out, he would come over in the morning and be there for Asher before he would go to school. And Asher, a couple of times, would come into my room. Like, I thought I did a good job of like messing the whole bed up. And he looked at me one day and he said, Mommy, where did Daddy sleep last night? And I was like, why do you know this? I'm like, I thought I did a really great job of like messing the whole bed up, like letting the dog on the bed and like, but yeah, no, he was just, it absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah. Wow.
It's crazy. We don't give him enough credit for sure.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I love that, he's just, he can show us, because he feels so safe, and just how much children are aware and how important it is.
Yeah.
So the family, those of you who haven't read the book, so their family has extended.
Oh, yeah.
So so this is where, it gets even more inspiring, because first of all, just being able to co-parent the way you both do and keep everything child-centered and allowing that intention to pull you forward, even when you're angry or you just kind of want to scream, that in and of itself is inspiring. But then, as you started to speak about, the family grew. Ben started dating somebody, and so talk about that, like that next layer, and then assimilating that into your lives.
I think too, when we started writing the book, like we got to the point where we're like, it's not just about 3 of us. So that's why we ended up adding in chapters for Nadia and Chad. And then we added in a chapter in because we wanted people to be able to hear from Asher too.
Yeah.
So we were like, yeah, well, it only makes sense to have all of us, because, without all 4 of us, we couldn't make this work.
Right.
Ben actually, I got married first, and I called Ben one day and I was like, listen, I'm not ready to have you at my wedding. Like, there was just this weird little, like, I still didn't think everybody that was going to be there was going to get it yet. Because even like in the beginning, our families were like, huh, what is this you guys are trying to like prove to us? And we're like, no, this is like, it's just what we're trying to do. Like, you guys will figure it out too. Like, we're still figuring out as we go. And Ben was like, you know what? Fine. We don't need to be at your wedding, whatever. fast forward like 2 years later, my whole entire family was at Ben's wedding. My sisters, my parents, my husband and I, it was just, it just shows like there's baby steps we needed to take. Like it wasn't we didn't get to where we are overnight. So, I mean, in a year and a half or 2 years, we got to the point where we were like, it would have been weird if we weren't there. And I think that Chad, my husband and Ben have sort of along the way figured out like this bond, and like they do things, they take Asher to places together. Well, not really right now, but they would go to sporting events together. They would, for some reason go to NASCAR races together. They would always take him places where I think the three of them, that makes it such a bond where Asher doesn't have to worry about like, oh, if I tell my stepfather I love him, my dad's not going to feel weird, or, there was never, it's not weird. And it's not weird for Asher to be able to go places with the two of them. And, the same thing, like Nadia and Ben had two little kids that basically I think of as my own. They come over here all the time. They come over here without them. I have like, if you saw the room that I'm sitting in, there's like doll houses and like things in here, because like we've made it so the kids, the kids don't know any different.
Yeah.
Like they just think like, oh, Asher has a stepmom and it's Nadia. Well, why don't we have a stepmom? They call me Coco, and they're like, well, is Coco my stepmom? And they're like, yeah, Coco could be your stepmom, but she's, but she was married to your dad. And they're like, what? Like, okay, like I don't quite get all this, but and I think for us, we started with baby steps. We would have dinner together as a family every once in a while. Now it's like almost weekly we have dinners together. And, we started by going, okay, we're going to go away for Christmas, or we're going to go away for Thanksgiving. Why don't we all go to the same place? And let's see, we started like just baby steps to like see where, see how much we can handle.
Yeah.
And then it was, then it was easy. And then it was like, okay, spring breaks. All right, let's go. Where are we going? We're all going someplace. And like my sister will bring her kids. So it's just evolved to what we have. Like it definitely could not have happened overnight. And we just kept, we kept trying, and we kept pushing it just a little bit further to see like, okay, well, this felt okay. Like, let's see if we can go here. Let's see if we go here. Oh, it's, Asher's 5th birthday. So obviously, like, the whole family's together, bring everybody together, bring Nadia, so it wasn't like we didn't do it going, okay, it's just our immediate family. All 4 of you are going to be together.
Right.
We kind of said, let's go in, big environments, and let's see where we go. Mm-hmm. But I mean, best case scenario, we couldn't have asked for what we have now. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were very, very lucky to be able to, but I mean, it was a lot of work. I mean, it's definitely, I think I might have hung up on Ben even like once this week. I was like, but it's good. Like I wouldn't have wished it to be any other way.
Yeah.
How do you feel now in terms of like you, I hearing you say all this and how it's evolved, it just like makes my heart feel so full for you. How do you feel now in terms of having this extended mixed family in comparison to how you were feeling when, you dreamed about your marriage, you dreamed about, as a young girl, like that was your dream, and it falling apart? I feel like it's important to see, what's at the end of it, how you can feel in comparison to that.
Right. Because now I feel like what I have now is even a bigger and better dream than I would have had then.
Yeah.
Like it's a different dream, but like I always say that, and Ben always says too, he's like, if you see me with my husband now in comparison to me with Ben, and if I see the way Ben is with his wife in comparison to how he was with me, it's night and day.
Mm.
So I think too, it's important for, you know, the kids and Asher to see like right relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think even now, like Asher even gets it, like, okay, we have this really great thing. It's not as great as it could have been, maybe, you know, not to have divorced parents, but if I was going to have something else, you can't beat this. You know, you can't beat what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like if you can make the intention, and I think, you know, something important to say here is obviously you need two people who are invested in this, two adults who are willing to do the hard work and to put that intention out there together. But it's almost like if you can sort of make it the goal to make your family happier after divorce. I mean, that's basically what you write about, is how ending your marriage did make you happier. So, but no matter who's listening, if you're going through a divorce, if you can both make that your goal, like, let's make our family unit somehow, some way, whatever that looks like for us, happier than it was before.
100%. Because we always joke, we're like, if we could do it, anybody can do it. Like, we're both like type A, like personalities, and, you know, neither one of us ever wants to give in, like, to say, okay, you're right, or, you know, whatever. Like, if we can do it, anybody can. And like, it is like, we are prime examples of realizing that it's possible for it to be way happier after divorce than it was during the marriage or pre-marriage even.
Yeah. So beautiful. It's so inspiring.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad you decided to write this book, actually, and to actually share your story. I think this is one of these things that, as you said, you know, like, first you have to overcome that shame that comes with ending a marriage. But, you know, to take that and turn it into this ultra empowering, beautiful tool that people can look at as like what's possible if we stay with our intention. I think it's just amazing. So I guess I just want the listeners to know, like, where can they find your book?
They can find it on Amazon. They can find it on Mascot Books. You can find us at Our Happy Divorce on Instagram, Facebook, at Nikki DeBartolo on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, no, we love it. I mean, that was our goal. Like, we decided when we wrote this book, if we can help even one couple, we've done our job.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your story. We can't wait to have Ben on next week. Yeah. And Nikki, you know, if there's any like parting words, that like a phrase or anything that you want our listeners to know, to remember, what do you think you could tell them?
My big thing, as always, is realize how smart your children are, no matter how old they are. They're smarter than we give them credit.
Yeah. Love it. So true.
I love that. Perfect. Thank you so much, Nikki. All you deep chatters out there, make sure you check out her book on Instagram, Facebook, all of the things that she mentioned. We'll include those in the show notes. And until next time, take care of yourselves and enjoy the next part of this episode next week.
To all you deep chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other deep chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.